best of them, not the worst parts, the best parts. This is the best of the rest.
Hello, and what I really want for Christmas is $1 million in small, unmarked bills. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received on release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's winter holiday month, and this week we are talking the 1988 film Ernest Saves Christmas. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my rubber-faced co-host, Andrew Williams. You ready for this one, Andrew?
I am. Rubber-faced.
You're always making these silly faces. You get really close to the webcam, and you just make these goofy faces and pull your cheeks back. It's so wacky.
Yeah, actually, I forgot about that time. I was on camera with you while I pulled an electrical outlet through the wall in my whole house.
You could call me Vern for some reason. Like, it's not my name, Andrew.
That's not your what?
We have a Christmas classic on our hands, Andrew. Ernest.
We do.
We're talking about Ernest on this podcast. Growing up, I mean, I would say what's your history with this movie, but what's your history with old Ernest P. World? Do you watch a lot of Ernest movies growing up?
They were there. I don't particularly think they were like staples or anything like that. Probably because like my dad thought Ernest was really dumb and didn't want to watch it all the time. But I don't know. Like, I don't think there was any real objection to it. Like, I remember watching Ernest Saves Christmas at least once, and like I know I saw Ernest Scared Stupid because how can you forget that movie? It's so he was definitely around, but like I definitely wouldn't say I have the fandom of some other people I know when it comes to Ernest. I've always really liked and appreciated Jim Varney for what he did with Ernest, and also like when he would randomly decide to do other things. And it's insane the genuine transformation he makes being Ernest versus other things. And we'll talk about that more later, I'm sure. But in that regard, yeah, like they were around, but I wouldn't say that it was like a staple or anything like that.
Yeah, pretty similar. I think my older brother, he's 4 years older than me, was a little bit more in the right age range when these Ernest movies are coming out. I think he was a bigger Ernest fan than I was, but I still watched, we watched them together. We'd rent them from the video store. Definitely Ernest Goes to Camp, Ernest Scared Stupid, Ernest Saves Christmas. These are the three I vividly remember and know that I watched multiple times. Could not tell you if I've seen any of the other Ernest films, but these three definitely stand out, and that's what we're talking about today. Andrew, how you been since our last record? You been good? Having a good week?
Yeah, why do you ask?
Well, we're coming up on like 150 episodes, right? This is the point in a podcast's lifespan where we got to spend like the first half just talking about random nonsense before we get to the part that people actually tuned in for. People now are listening for our personal banter and our personal daily lives. That's what they want to hear before we talk about the actual movie.
Well, I woke up. I had a package of strawberry frosted Pop-Tarts with a sugar-free mango Monster energy drink.
So this movie was released November 11th, 1988. Pulling the plug on that right now. That's not us. That's not what we do.
I was gonna say, as evidenced by my stellar dialoguing there, you can tell that I was very prepared for that. But
you ever had that experience? You ever like find a new podcast? You're like, oh man, this seems like a fun topic or concept. And I'm not gonna throw any podcast under the bus because by golly, anyone that I name wildly more successful than us. I'm not trying to throw shade or anything, but like I'll listen to it and be like, oh, this sounds like a cool idea. I download a few episodes on topics I think I would like, and like 30 minutes in, they're just talking about nonsense and all these inside jokes, and I'm like, I don't know. This isn't why I'm here.
But before we get any further, Chris, I'd like to tell you about Omaha Steaks.
Well, look, at least they get paid to talk about that.
Oh man,
I can understand ads a little bit more.
And like, I guess that like it's something that's interesting because like there's some podcasts that like Liz listens to where like she'll listen to them like in the house while we're cleaning or something, and I'm just like, wow, this sounds insufferable. Because I can't like the way that people are talking, what they're talking about, and like so many times like the topic seems like totally secondary to like the rapport.
100%.
And I guess in some cases, if you've built a really good rapport over, 100 episodes, that can become what people are coming for. Like it's like, yeah, cool. It's like about this. It's a podcast where we kind of recap this true crime show, but like our rapport has become like the foundational thing that people want to hear. And like, that's the humor they have between each other but like, you kind of have to start from the beginning to get that, which I guess is, I don't know why you wouldn't, but like at the same time, like if I'm looking at podcast episodes and I see, hey, here's an episode about this topic I like, but it's like their 48th episode. And like you said, the first half is like 30 minutes of like something else. I'm going to be like, well, eject. So
yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I can't.
But like you said, they're all getting way more money than us.
Exactly. I can't really knock them, and obviously it works. But, yeah. I don't know. It's definitely something that's on my mind just about every time that we record. I'm like, what if this is someone's very first episode of Best of the Rest? Like, they clicked on this episode because like, wow, Ernest saves Christmas. What can they say about that? And got to make sure we deliver in a timely manner. That's always on my mind.
And I would say we've done a very good job of preserving the core concept so that if your first episode of Best of the Rest is any episode, it would be successful. You would be able to jump in with no issues. It's like Marvel and DC pretend all their comics are.
We're better at continuity than Marvel and DC. You heard it here first, folks.
Oh, I wouldn't say we're better at continuity. We're just better. Here's better jumping in at any episode and start figuring it out.
All right. Enough playful banter, Andrew. Let's talk about this film. It's what the people want to hear. Ernest Saves Christmas, released on November 11th, 1988, just a couple weeks before yours truly was born. It's made on a budget of $6.5 million. At the box office, it brings in $28.2 million, which is a huge return on investment. Like, they were undoubtedly thrilled with that box office, which is amazing. But, because the budget was $6.5 million, $28.2 million, that's a huge success. Critically, as you might expect, it's not well received. It holds just a 36% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. I love this. The audience score is 42%. Now, that critic score is based on, scores of the time, archival reviews from when the movie was released. But the audience score, those aren't coming in until Rotten Tomatoes gets up and running. So these are people over a decade after this movie comes out, logging into Rotten Tomatoes to review Ernest Saves Christmas, and most of them are giving it a bad review. Why are people doing this? There's got to be a better use of
this. Yeah. I was actually surprised by that budget, and I was curious if because there's kind of two eras of Ernest movies. There's what people call the Disney 4, which are the 4 that Touchstone makes, which is the first 4, which is Ernest Goes to Camp, Ernest Saves Christmas, Ernest Goes to Jail, and Ernest Scared Stupid. Those are generally seen as the 4 attempts by a studio to make Ernest a thing. And they're all varying levels of success based off the fact that obviously there are so many of them. The first one, Ernest Goes to Camp, is made for $3.5 million and makes $23.5 million. The second one, Ernest Goes to Jail, is made for, the second one is this, as you said, made for $6.5 million, makes $28.2 million. And then the latter two, Ernest Goes to Jail and Ernest Scared Stupid, are both made for about $9 million and change, with Ernest Goes to Jail making $25 million and then Ernest Scared Stupid making only $14 million, which is why,
to me, that's the Ernest
that's
movie.
Wild. You're right. Exactly. Especially now with time past, that's the Ernest movie that most people talk about, because also it's, I think, easily the weirdest. It's the one that genuinely swings for the fences with what it's doing.
Yeah.
And so we'll probably talk about it one day. I'm sure we'll get there eventually. But yeah, and it's a $14 million return off a $9.6 million movie. At that point, generally speaking, it looks like the studio started feeling that the magic was kind of gone. And that being said, you get several more Ernest movies nonetheless, but the budgets get increasingly smaller and the release gets increasingly more limited, and the general awareness goes down quite heavily. But there are I think there's 9 Ernest movies. It's pretty wild. But this is only the second. So this is actually still when Ernest is a pretty viably reliable franchise for Touchstone, which is kind of a weird thing to say out loud.
Yes, it is. Let's take a look at the creative team. The movie is written by Ed Turner and B. Klein. Now, listen, we often talk about writers, sometimes even directors, that I personally don't know a lot about, but I try to do my due diligence, see what else they've done, try to find some connections. Here's what I found on Ed Turner. 3 total credits that I could find on IMDb. And he died in 2005, so R.I.P. to Ed Turner. B. Klein, 1 credit on IMDb. I don't know if he's still with us. R.I.P. if he isn't. Andrew, that's the extent of my research. Do you have anything on these 2 writers?
No, I mean they don't have any
Not even other Ernest movies.
No, like the first Ernest movie, Ernest Goes to Camp, is co-written by John Cherry. And John Cherry is the director on a lot of this stuff going back. We'll talk about him more obviously in a second, but like John Cherry is like essentially creating the Ernest character. Is John Cherry's kind of part in this. But yeah, these movies, like, and you're kind of like, man, is there like something missing? Like, do we ever? And like, no, like these movies are like almost all exclusively written by different people almost every time, with the only kind of creative thread between them being John Cherry.
John Cherry, as you said, director of this film, almost all of the Ernest movies, and is a creator of the Ernest character. For anyone that maybe doesn't know, the character of Ernest was created by an ad agency, essentially, and he appeared in commercials for various products. He spoke directly to the camera, said, "You know what I mean, Vern," as a catchphrase. That was it. That was the extent of Ernest. He had his look, his denim jacket, his ball cap, and that was Ernest. And then he slowly became like an entity unto himself with a TV special, and eventually crossing over into films where he's most well known these days. But such a wild origin for a character. It reminds me, it's kind of like Pee Wee Herman, but Pee Wee Herman was created like to be an entertainment figure. He wasn't created for commercials and then comes over. I can't think of anything else to really compare it to. The Geico Cavemen, those began in commercials and then they got a short run as a TV show, but obviously not the success that Ernest had. So pretty unique career path for this character and for Jim Varney.
Yeah, it really is weird to think about that, like, that's what it starts at, but like also it just speaks to like, and like, I'm not going to say that you don't have like characters in commercials now. You certainly still do with like, I know, Flow with Progressive, things like that. Like, it's not uncommon to have like fictional characters as the heart of your ad campaigns. But yeah,
but
like,
imagine Flo goes to camp coming.
Yeah, like it would be weird. It would be very weird. And I, imagine Flo just talking straight to the camera while she rips wires out of someone's wall. Like it's one of those things that's so, you hear that phrase, they don't make them like this anymore. And I kind of generally don't like that, but just like, I couldn't fathom an ad agency coming up with like the Ernest character today or something akin to that, just because not just is it a character that's like, this kind of created new fictional character created solely to sell things, which, that part's not that strange. But like, the approach of the ads and how strange the ads were, and just the general idea of it being Ernest being a huge pest to this guy Vern, and like purposely making him mad but being completely oblivious to it. It's such a strange application of that, and I just couldn't really imagine something like that now.
90% of John Cherry's work is going to be related to Ernest, especially after Ernest crosses over into movies. John Cherry did pass away fairly recently in 2022 due to complications with Parkinson's disease. So, R.A.P. Mr. Cherry.
He was. I'm saying he was the executive vice president and co-namesake of the Camden or the Carden and Cherry ad agency, which created the Ernest character. So he had this whole other. So what a strange career to have, to be like an executive at an ad agency that like accidentally springboards into a film career. Like, whoops. I guess I just started directing films now.
Guess I make movies now.
Wild career. But he basically, if Ernest was in it, if Jim Varney was in it as Ernest, John Cherry basically directs it. He does make a couple of other movies without Jim Varney, or I think it's before Jim Varney actually passes, but after his declining health kind of made him unable to play Ernest. Both relatively unknown things. One, I guess, is a Laurel and Hardy movie where you've got Bronson Pinchot and Gaylord Sartain as Stan and Ollie. And then, yeah, just an odd thing to do. I can't make Ernest movies anymore. Let's do a Laurel and Hardy reboot. But I guess if you can, you can. But yeah, his career basically is Ernest. And what a creation to leave behind.
Well, Andrew, it's time. It's time we jump into this movie, talk about all the best parts, everything we like about Ernest Saves Christmas. Are you ready?
I am.
After nearly 100 years of service, the time has come for Santa Claus to choose his successor and renew the magic of Christmas. Santa has chosen a children's entertainer named Joe in Florida as his replacement, but Joe's manager is doing everything he can to keep Santa away so that Joe can focus on reinventing his career. Luckily for Santa, he has befriended a dim-witted but well-meaning cab driver named Ernest and a runaway team named Harmony Star, who vow to aid in his mission. As Santa tries to convince Joe to accept the role of a lifetime, it's up to Ernest P. Worrell to deliver the magic sleigh in time to deliver gifts on Christmas Eve.
Classic
Tale as old as time. Classic.
I was gonna say, the classic Christmas tale.
This old hat. Ernest is kind of, I mean, he's the main character because Ernest Saves Christmas, but like the A storyline really chugs along with Ernest kind of in the, periphery here.
Ernest is not really part of the A storyline after a certain point of this movie. Like once he introduces, or I guess once he has to spring Santa from jail. So like the second half of this movie, he's not really involved in the A plot. This is very much a movie where you could kind of say Ernest is along for the ride in a way. And in the case of the climax of this movie, quite literally. Yeah. This isn't like Ernest Scared Stupid. I again envision in my head where like he's front and center. Like that's Ernest Scared Stupid is again oddly like I think that's the template for Ernest movies in people's heads. Yeah. And like
Ernest Goes to Camp is clearly developed as a vehicle to highlight this character.
Right, and so it's interesting that for the second movie they do a story where he's arguably so ancillary to what's happening. But
I'm curious if this is a script that was already floating around and they just threw Ernest into it, and that's why we can't find any information about these writers. Like it's not the usual Ernest guys returning. I don't know.
It's possible. Like I said, this one doesn't even have a John Cherry story credit, so it's very possible that the story is Ed Turner, so it's possible that this is an Ed Turner script that then B. Klein, whoever B. Klein is, rewrote to include the Ernest character. That's hardly a. They probably just saw. I mean, there's plenty of instances in the script where they give Jim Varney a chance to do his classic, like, I'm going to play 7 other characters that are all just still Ernest pretending to be other people, but I'm going to get credited as those characters too for some reason. Like, I love that his wiki, like, on some of these movies, it credits him for all the different characters he plays, and I'm like, no, those are all Ernest in disguise. Like, there's no other characters here.
Oh, man, we're going to talk about it. Talk about all those characters he plays when we get to scenes. But first, we got to talk about the cast. Starting with a high point, the best casting and best performance of the film, because every episode, we recognize one person who goes above and beyond the call of duty, that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance, and we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, kick us off here. Who is getting your Mark Strong Award for Ernest Saves Christmas?
I feel a little weird not giving it to Jim Varney, but I feel like I got to go with my gut on this one, and I am going to be giving it to Douglas Seal as Santa Claus. Oddly enough, not the first time this man has played Santa Claus. He plays Santa Claus in an episode of Amazing Stories, which was a kind of weird anthology series created by Steven Spielberg and a bunch of other people. But there is an episode of that show where he plays Santa Claus 2 years before this. So I am actually extremely curious if that played a factor in him getting chosen to play Santa Claus here. Because I
gotta imagine if you're a working actor of a certain age with a certain look, you're gonna get these job offers, right?
I feel like it. It's a really wild episode too, because Santa basically accidentally trips a home burglary alarm and gets arrested, and they throw him into a jail cell with a bunch of other people dressed as Santa. So he's trying to get out of jail by convincing people that he's the real Santa Claus, while in a jail cell with like 10 other people also dressed as Santa Claus. And that's
not a bad premise. I'm not gonna lie, it sounds pretty good.
It's not bad. I watched some clips from it when I saw this, and I was like, it's not bad. Pat Hingle is also in it. He played Commissioner Gordon in the Burton Batman flicks, which is always wild to see that man in like stuff where he gives an actual performance versus his role as Commissioner Gordon, where he's just kind of like, oh no, Batman help. He gave us the signal. Yeah, it's pretty wild. So anyway, but he brings this perfect energy to Santa Claus, which is like it's a weird thing to say, but like Santa Claus is like a weird role that obviously dozens upon dozens upon dozens of people have played now. Everybody from Tim Allen to Kurt Russell or Jeff Bridges, if you prefer. But it's quite a legacy with this character, but he's got this weary energy about him. So like you believe that this is a guy that's been Santa Claus for a long time, but also just the heart and the compassion and the empathy he has as the character is all just perfect. Like, you know, even when people in this movie are like doing the wrong thing, there's still this hope and this empathy and understanding that he has for them. And it is perfect. It's genuinely, to me, one of the things that carries the movie through is just, you know, the energy and the just performance he gives as Santa Claus. And I think the movie is better for having him as Santa Claus. So if you're talking about people that are genuinely elevating the movie up, Douglas Seal, Santa Claus.
Andrew, I am agreeing 100% with every point you just made. And going into this movie, I was like, well, obviously Mark Strong Award's going to Jim Varney. It's an Ernest movie. Yeah. He's great as a character. And I do love him as Ernest, and we will get to that praise. But there's no denying that Douglas Seal just pops as Santa Claus. I mean, he is the embodiment of the character. I'm agreeing with everything here. It's that the kindness is so genuine, especially the way he like never loses hope for our runaway teen character we'll talk about here in a moment. And lets her stumble and make her mistakes and knows that she will come back around and do the right thing. Is never upset with her, never chastises her, always on the side of optimism and hope and belief, and just embodies that with his kind look and his smile. He's so good at it. I'm not surprised that he has played Santa Claus before. He was also the voice of the Sultan in Aladdin. Role that most people are probably familiar with. He did that a couple years after this. The man had been acting since 1934, so his credits are immense. No longer with us, did pass away in 1999 at the ripe old age of 85. So long life leaves behind a impressive filmography and one heck of a Santa Claus performance. R.A.P. to Mark Strong Award winner Douglas Seal. But Andrew, we got to talk some Ernest. Ernest P. Worrell. By the way, one of the best fake names ever, Ernest P. Worrell. It's so good. I imagine he was initially just called Ernest, and at some point during one of these movies, or maybe even back in the commercial days, they had to come up with the last name, and whoever added the P. Worrell, man, they deserve. 40 years later, they deserve a raise for that work. It's all so the credit. Good. But I mean, Jim Varney just playing the role he was born to play, and it's. If I was 8 years old, I would no doubt be giving the Mark Strong Award to Ernest. And I'm not trying to do this as backhanded, but as an adult watching this performance, I appreciate the lengths this man is going to create this entertaining character for children. Is kind of how I feel about it. He sneaks a laugh out of me more than once in this movie. Don't get me wrong, but it is so in the vein of children's entertainer. That's just kind of the view I have on it now. More of an appreciation, I guess. And I mean, no doubt he's winning Mark Strong Awards up and down these Ernest movies, but old Santa Claus here, just take it from this one. But it's not like this is suddenly a bad Ernest performance or anything. I mean, he spends 20% of the film 6 inches away from the camera lens, making his faces. He plays a number of different characters, lots of good sight gags. It's Ernest. It's good stuff.
Yeah, and I like Jim Varney a lot. I mean, obviously, some of the other things he's known, probably he was the Slinky Dog in the first 2 Toy Story movies, before getting replaced by, I think it's Blake Clark is the guy's name that does it after that. But
it's the guy from Home Improvement that ran the
hardware store.
Yeah.
That's right. And you've seen him in other things too. But but apparently him and Varney were friends, and they both have the same voice, sounding like they smoked a pack of cigarettes a day, which in Varney's case was.
I was going to say that's exactly R.A.P. But why he's not with us anymore?
Yes. And oddly, the minute he was diagnosed, he stopped smoking so that he could keep working. But he's just the Ernest character is just, there's. I think the range he has gets a little underappreciated. Kind of when everyone sees Ernest, and that's what they see as Ernest. They're he's just kind of acting dumb. But there's a lot of different pieces of Ernest. Obviously, he does all these different characters and impressions throughout every movie. There is a lot of, like you said, the rubber face, the different looks, the physical comedy. And I think he put a lot into Ernest. Ernest clearly meant a lot to him. And I don't think, even as the general quality of the films or the impact of the films may have lessened over the years, his dedication to the character remained. It's kind of like you talk about Michael Gough as Alfred or something like that. But even as these films are starting to get lesser and lesser, the commitment these men have to the characters is still fantastic. And it's still they are showing up every single time, and they're never the weakling. And I also remember him oddly as Jed Clampett in the Beverly Hillbillies movie, where if you had told me that Jed Clampett was being played by Ernest, I would have thought you were insane. There's this whole other completely different vibe he's bringing out in that movie as Jed Clampett, and just even the look, just having kind of the same face the whole movie instead of shifting it around every 30 seconds. Turns out he looks like a wildly different person. But he's also the villain in Three Ninjas High Noon at Mega Mountain. It's just, what a career, what a range, what a
he's the villain.
I think
is Hulk
he
Hogan
is.
a good guy in that one? I thought Hulk Hogan was the villain.
Hulk Hogan is in it, and I think he is like with the villain and then like switches sides. I don't know.
If this podcast makes it to 250 episodes, maybe we'll cover Three Ninjas High Noon at Mega Mountain. We'll find
Hulk Hogan with hair, man. And then I can endlessly make that's the wall, brother, jokes. But which is maybe by then a reference you'll understand. But
I hope to get it one day.
Because I can't just tell you. That would be ridiculous. Anyway, though, Jim Varney, just fantastic. The dedication he had to the character. And just like there's... Even in this movie, like Santa Claus kind of describes Ernest as like this very well-meaning, good person who's just not quite the smartest. And I think that is the exact energy that Jim Varney brings to the character. There is a sense of, again, he has that empathy that kind of seems very genuine. And yeah, he's grating, and yeah, he doesn't really realize it, but there's still this, he's the guy that if you called and needed help with something, he's going to come and help you with it. It may go completely wrong at that point, but then he's still going to show up and do it. But yeah, can't say enough things about Jim Varney. The dedication to the character alone for just Ernest is fantastic. And then the other things he did, he's just, you know what I mean?
Yes. I do want to shout out his physicality and his physical performance. You talked about like his rubber face. He does a lot of things that if Ernest would have debuted after 1994, I would say, oh, he's just doing Jim Carrey shtick. But this is years before Jim Carrey busted into the scene.
I didn't want to say it. I really didn't want to say it. But there's definitely some DNA here that is carrying over.
Yeah, and look, I love Jim Carrey, and I'm not saying he ripped off Ernest by any means. Don't get me wrong, but he launches his career on the rubber face thing and putting his entire body into a performance, and he's great at that. But I just admire the way that Jim Varney was doing that. He certainly had influences, maybe like Jerry Lewis. I don't know, how far back he had to go to find someone who's getting this kind of performance. But he's throwing himself in a performance that is, I'm trying to not oversell it or undersell it. I don't want to say it's groundbreaking, but I really admire it because it's seemingly all his own creativity and imagination he's putting into the performance. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
There you go. That was unintentional, I'm assuming. But no, I typed Jim Varney, Jim Carrey into Google just because I was curious if maybe Jim Carrey had said anything about it. And the top hit is a Reddit post that says, "Just realized Ernest is the father to Jim Carrey's style."
Yes, I agree with you, Redditor. Yes.
So we're not really the first ones to get there. But other people have definitely noticed that there's definitely some shared DNA there. And like I said, the kind of shifting facial expressions, the various characters, the physicality, there's a lot of, especially as you watch early Jim Carrey where he's really cutting his teeth and the different impressions and stuff he's doing, yeah.
And Oliver Clark plays Joe. This is the man that is going to be taking over the role of Santa Claus. Kind of an alum of the show. He's technically in Mystery Men, Andrew, as reverse psychologist, which I think is at the superhero tryouts, and I don't think we even hear him talk. Maybe he says his name. I Googled it, and it's literally a blurry picture of him in the background, so we certainly didn't talk about him on the episode. He also plays Santa multiple times. A few years after this, in 1996, he voices Santa Claus in Christmas in Cartoon Town. And also, get this, Andrew, he plays the principal in an episode of Full House. Andrew, guess what the episode is called? up on the roof.
I don't know. Whoa.
Here's the synopsis, because I had to look it up. We're seeing that title. DJ sets out to perform the ultimate senior prank in an attempt to top her Uncle Jesse. She got the idea to lift Principal Robillard's car, that's the character he plays, Principal Robillard, onto the school roof via a crane driven by Kimmy's boyfriend. The prank took off without a hitch, with just two small problems. It began to rain, and the car was a convertible. In other words,
Whoops.
It had nothing to do with Christmas, and I got my hopes up.
Nothing at all. Nothing at all.
But just for a moment, we all believed.
I can only assume that he might be like a deleted scene from Mystery Men, because I'm sure there's like a 6-hour version of just that superhero tryout scene by itself, like without even the rest of the movie. And like it's but reverse psychologist sounds like an extremely funny character, so I'm sad. I don't know if there's any deleted. I know I've seen like alternate scenes for that movie from various things, but I'm curious if there's ever been like a real document of all of that. But yeah,
there should be.
Wild, but yeah.
A great performance here, though. Like, he's taking over the role of Santa, so he's got to embody all those same things. I love that he's a children's performer. He cares about kids. We kind of see like this last temptation of Santa Claus moment where like he is trying to be talked into doing this horror movie and clearly doesn't want to do that, wants to remain wholesome, and of course ultimately decides to become Santa Claus. But yeah, it's a totally believable character to take over this role.
Yeah, they really sell that, like, you know, he's all about like he wants to help kids learn, he wants to help kids, you know, grow into better people. He's got that right energy. He's got this kind of but he's also at a crossroads because he had apparently like a children's show and it's been canceled. So his agent is trying to find him things to do, and he gets him, what is it called? Christmas Sleigh, but it's SLAY. And I love that, like, it's a scene, we'll talk more about the scenes, but like his whole problem is he doesn't want it to be violent and he doesn't want to swear. And it's like, that's like the sticking points for him. He's like in late stage contract negotiations, still like, can we do something about the swearing and the violence? And they're just like, what? But that's exactly what I guess Santa's looking for. And it's a great performance. Like the sense of wonder that he has when he realizes that it's all legit it's perfect. He sells it exactly like you would if you suddenly realized that all of this stuff was real, and he does a great job with it. So it is a great performance that brings again the exact same kind of energy that you would want for the man who would be Santa Claus, which how has that not been the title of anything yet?
The man who would
like
be Santa Claus.
I feel like it has to be. I'm sure it's out there and someone's rushing to Discord to correct me right now. But I just get freaked out when I watch Santa Claus is Coming to Town, and Santa Claus is this tall redheaded dude that starts growing a beard. And I'm always like, what? Because that's all.
What
it
is
takes
this
to be
now? Santa Claus is Coming to Town?
Yeah, it's a Rankin Bass, so it's like a stop motion, like that old Rudolph special. But
And he's a redhead?
Like, yeah. Before he gets old, Santa Claus is a redhead. It's kind of like when you find out George Washington was 6'2" with red hair and had bad teeth, and you're just like, uh-oh. But
well, I mean, bad teeth is pretty well known, right? But
yeah,
red hair,
but
I didn't know that.
No wonder he beat the British. This giant redheaded man screaming at them with his weird teeth. Anyway, but no. So Oliver Clark brings the exact right energy to this role. Perfect.
Noelle Parker plays Harmony Star. That's the name the character has given herself. Birth name Pamela Trenton. Here's what's fun about Noelle Parker, Andrew. Guess what her birthday is?
I don't know.
I'll give you a hint. Her name is Noelle.
Is it December 25th?
It's December 25th, 1971. How fun is that? And here she is in a Christmas movie. I thought that was fun.
That is fun.
I really like the performance here. Clearly like a Madonna-influenced as far as her fashion and style, and I like this kid. I like their sort of story arc. You know, they're a runaway trying to make it on their own. Think their parents don't care about them, and slowly realize that they should be more accepting of her own family and go back and give them another chance. It's nice. She steals Santa's magical sack at some point and brings it back. It's probably the most touching part of the movie, her returning that item. And for being, you know, the youngest member of the main cast, she totally holds her own against veteran performers and does a great job. Noelle still working to this day. You can look at her credits up and down, working regularly, various TV shows and even feature films.
I find it very, very funny for some reason that she played Amy Fisher in a movie. Because I don't know if you know who Amy Fisher is, but Amy Fisher is the woman who shot and did not successfully kill, but shot and severely wounded Mary Jo Buttafuoco, the wife of Joey Buttafuoco.
Okay.
So she's just this attempted murderer, basically, that, you know, she went to jail for what she did, got paroled, but I just didn't. It reminds me that we quite literally used to make television movies about friggin' everything. Nowadays, that would be a prestige. That would be a prestige format drama miniseries from Ryan Murphy. So, but yeah, I agree completely with everything else. She's, like I said, still showing up occasionally, but does a great job here. Like you said, playing off of all these kind of veteran character actors, holds her own, brings a great energy to the cast. And like I said, she's like the youngest member of this cast by a good, probably close to 20 years at this point. But she does a great job standing alongside. And like I said, she's got something of an arc. Like Santa Claus really doesn't have an arc. Ernest obviously is just Ernest this whole movie. But she's the one that is kind of like on the fringes of kind of going down the wrong path. And the events of this movie and the events of the actions of Santa Claus end up having a profound impact. And it's good stuff.
And then we have Gaillard Sartain as Chuck, who's I would say the comedic relief, but I mean, it's an Ernest movie, but sort of a side story giving us some comedic relief, playing this recurring character, him alongside Bill Burge playing Bobby. Now, Gaillard was a regular on Hee Haw. Again, tons of credits to his name, and alum of the show, because he's the assistant coach in The Replacements.
He is.
I never put that together
man.
until I was doing this research, and I was like, he's in The Replacements? He's got to be some kind of extra or something, and I Googled it. He's the assistant coach, and we talked about him very specifically when we covered The Replacements. Because him communicating
before a game.
Yes, and I loved him communicating with David Denman's character, who's deaf, and they kind of find their way to communicate. Yeah, it's really, really good. That's the same guy, kind of breaking my brain a little bit.
That is wild. He was also in the Laurel and Hardy movie that John Cherry made after this, playing Hardy. But yeah, when I first saw him, I was like, this guy looks kind of like Jonathan Winters. But he's not, clearly, because he was way too young to be Jonathan Winters. But yeah, that's nuts. That just clicked in my head when you said it out loud, that like, oh man, it is that guy. But yeah, he's apparently in a lot of these Ernest movies. I'm looking at his thing right now, and I see that he's in Ernest Goes to Camp as one of the chefs. He's in Ernest Goes to Jail as Chuck. He's also in the classic Stop or My Mom Will Shoot. So what a career.
Oh. Well, Chuck and Bobby are also characters created by the ad agency that did star in commercials. So they tried to do this little, kind of crossover attempt, try to get them launched. Obviously, it wasn't to the success of Ernest, but you see that pair show up quite a bit. As we established, Gaillard has a long filmography and career. Bill pretty much only did Bobby as far as his acting credits are concerned. Much more, he's not completely silent, and he has a few lines, but he kind of plays that, teller role or Silent Bob role. He's really more there to react to Chuck's more obnoxious behavior. But Bobby has this face that's you remember the bitter beer commercials from the 90s?
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah, he
bottom
just
lip
looks
would
like
touch the
that.
nose. That's he looks just like that.
Yep. He does. Wild.
And lastly, I just want to mention Billy Bird, who plays a character named Mary. Not a major role, but does like end up being Santa Claus's love interest at the end of the movie. Like when he retires from being Santa Claus, it goes back to normal life. It's implied they're gonna start dating, which is very nice. She works at the Children's Museum, so she helps the heroes a couple times throughout the movie. But Billy Bird, no longer with us, R.A.P., passed away in 2002. Ripe old age of 94.
Was 94.
Andrew. I got this from her Wikipedia. She was discovered at age 8 from an orphanage where she had a vaudeville act. What a flippin' story. Makes her way to Hollywood, appears in a lot of John Hughes films like 16 Candles, Home Alone, and Dennis the Menace, so did very well for herself. Just a great story and another like kind presence, whenever she ends up with Santa Claus in the end, you're like, okay, I get that. Got a Mrs. Claus vibes.
Well, she's got to have the Mrs. Claus vibes because, as we've established, Santa Claus has no money, so he's gonna need some help getting through life now that he's not Santa Claus. But she's definitely somebody that I feel like everybody has seen somewhere. She's obviously I just watched Home Alone, and she plays like the woman in the airport that Catherine O'Hara is like trying to give, like, she's like, here's my tickets, here's some money, here's some earrings, here's a pocket translator, here's all this stuff, trying to give her. And her husband is like, we're not going to do this. And that's when Catherine O'Hara gives her like, I'm desperate speech. And one of her many I'm desperate speeches throughout the course of that movie, it turns out.
Yeah.
But like you said, she has a very empathetic presence, a very kind presence, a very genuine, like you said. And so, yeah, she ends up taking an attachment to the man who would no longer be Santa Claus. And the implication very much at the end of this film is that they're gonna hang out at least once.
Yeah, I'd be nervous there, Andrew.
I mean, she does do the whole, like, I'm sure we can find something to do.
All right. Let's talk about this movie, Andrew. Starting with the high point, the best scenes, or at least our personal favorite. So, in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all reindeer? What is the best scene in Ernest Saves Christmas?
You alluded to it earlier, but I think I gotta go with when Harmony / Pamela returns Santa's bag. It's a big moment where like and Santa like knows she's taken it. Like there's like she thinks she pulled a fast one on them, but she hasn't. He knows. Like there's a big moment where like he's in Joe's house and Joe's like, this is just feathers, and Santa's like, I know it's just feathers. Like like he's well aware of what it is. But and so Pamela
I love that little reveal that like he knew all along. Because you expect it to be like, what do you mean it's just feathers? But he's like, like you said, he knows.
Turns out he knows when you've been bad or good. So it's apparently a hallmark of the character. But it's so anyway, that kind of builds to this moment where like she's literally about to like bolt on a bus with this bag, which I assuming she thinks eventually will give her something useful. But and in doing so is going to kind of upset this whole thing because without the sack, there can be no Santa Claus. So she's at the bus station and she's prompted by a kind of brother that tells his sister that Santa Claus isn't real and that she's this, and she kind of has this blow up moment where she's like, what are you talking about? Like, of course he's real. And she kind of realizes she has to go back. So she comes back and there's a very kind of like heartfelt, tearful thing where Santa basically is like, I knew you'd come back and I knew eventually you'd do the right thing. And like you said, there's no judgment. It's just understanding, empathy, all of those things, because Santa knows that she's had a rough go of it. He kind of alludes to it throughout the course of the film that, like, you know, a couple years ago or even a year ago, there was something with her parents where, you know, they kind of let her go by the wayside because they were too focused on their own problems. So he's very understanding of that. And so this is a great performance from Noelle, kind of showing the kind of tragedy / triumph of her character, kind of forcing herself to go against what a day ago might have been instinct, kind of do the right thing. And then obviously just the empathy that Santa Claus always has, because if it's anybody who's going to always understand, it's Santa Claus.
I gotta agree with you. There's another scene I was considering highlighting as my favorite. It's much more of just like a silly gag, but like, no, I can't follow that with calling that my favorite. This is the emotional high point. It's a scene that genuinely works in a very, very goofy film that really isn't trying to elevate itself very much in any kind of emotional way. But this scene still lands. You got to give it up to our performers, our actors, really delivering, and it totally works as a nice little lesson and moral in the middle of this. And like we've been, praising Douglas for his performance, it's just a great example of his kindness and how perfect he is as this character. Shortly before that moment, he's given some advice to Ernest, and he says, "Trust people. It pays off more than you'd think." And man, don't we all need that reminder sometimes? Like, it's better to put your trust in people and sometimes be burned, but be rewarded more often than you aren't.
It's a lesson that we could all stand to be reminded of from time to time. It's like this podcast, Chris. It's the very nature of it. It is extremely easy to be cynical, and it is very easy to just always see the negative. In fact, I think that's kind of and it's funny. I was kind of watching a video, the new H Bomber guy video about plagiarism. And there's a big section on the angry video game nerd, because he ran into some plagiarism controversies after he kind of handed off his channel and it was kind of being run by a service mostly. But I was just reminded of kind of that era. Stick with me, folks. This is a bit of a tangent, which we never do on this show. But I was just reminded of just like, there's so many people that their internet persona was just talking about how terrible some stuff was. Like like even the nostalgia critic, largely is just an angry character who just can't believe the stuff he's watching and the movies he's watching. And I'm not going to say it's not entertaining. I know Doug Walker has his own set of controversies, so I'm not going to,
sure,
heap praise on the man or anything. But like, there's so many people that cut their teeth on the early internet that really all they were doing was just being angry. And I won't say it for the sake of making you censor it, but like, being a prick kind of was so many people's internet identity early on, or just generally being super negative about stuff. Like, and don't get me wrong, plenty of people were super entertaining when they did it. They made it into great they were able to bring a lot of comedy out of it. But there's a reason that all of those people are known for being negative and nobody was really known for being positive. Because that nobody really wanted to watch people be positive about things. So in that regard, even now, it's just still so super easy to be cynical and just continue down that path of just being negative. Like, some of these guys are literally still doing the same shtick 20 years later. And I don't know where I flipped the switch. Like, don't get me wrong, there was a time in my life where watching a dude talk about how terrible Suburban Commando was my brain was like, this is great. Why wouldn't I think this is hilarious? But there was some point when my brain kind of flipped, and suddenly I was kind of like, well, yeah, it's a kid's action comedy starring Hulk Hogan. What did we think it was going to be? Like, my brain just kind of defaults to like, well, of course, yeah. But now it's just kind of like, oh, it's so much harder to be positive about things. We talked about the genesis of the show before, and it comes out of that idea that like, it's so easy to just hate everything. and it's much harder to be nice about things. And it's so there, Ernest Saves Christmas, just distilling the genesis of this podcast down to a single line there.
Well said, Andrew. Kindness and positivity takes effort. And I don't say that to like pat ourselves on the back, but it's the reasoning behind our premise at the very least. Like there's, talk about like those early internet guys, and like I don't watch either of the creators you mentioned these days, but certainly a ton back in the day. And I could still go back and watch some of those old videos to get some entertainment out of it. Don't get me wrong, but you jump forward 15 years and that negativity and anger has just multiplied to an unreasonable degree, and it gets to a point where like there's enough a-holes online, there's enough negativity. I don't need to put any more bandwidth of that into the internet. Let's try to do something different, and that's what we're doing here. Darn it, talking about Ernest Saves Christmas.
There's a line in a movie called Harvey. I don't know if you've seen it. Jimmy Stewart, when he has the imaginary bunny friend. And he has a line where he basically says, years ago, my mother used to say to me, she'd say, in this world, Elwood, you can be oh so smart or oh so pleasant. And he says, well, for years I was smart and I recommend pleasant. And he says, you may quote me. So I'm quoting Jimmy Stewart, Elwood P. Dowd from Harvey, that sometimes be pleasant.
I like that.
It's a great movie. You should watch it.
I'll add it to my list, Andrew. There's a scene in this movie where Ernest is making breakfast. I watched this movie with my whole family.
Just telling you about this at the beginning of the show. Yeah. Man.
Literally, he's. I mean, a lot of fun gags happen here, but I love that he was flipping the pancakes, and they were just flying off screen. Literally, friend of the show, my wife is like, where are the pancakes going? Like, it's like a continuity error or something. She's like, he's just flipping them. And then at the end of the scene, he holds up a plate, an entire stack of pancakes just falls onto frame onto the plate.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
That's good.
That is so good. I love that scene because I was telling you, I had it on the TV while we were recording, and there's this part of it is he covers his hands in butter and he's like rubbing it in like it's lotion to his hands. But it's this giant bowl of butter. Like he has this insanely large bowl of butter when he makes pancakes, and it is, for some reason, like I was watching it and he's like just his mannerisms and everything while he's rubbing this butter into his hands. I was like, this is the funniest man alive. Like, I don't know how this is working, but it is.
Yeah. Friend of the show said she's very Michael Scott in that way, because Michael Scott puts butter on it when he grills his foot on a George Foreman, puts butter on it. So. Same concept doing on his hands.
Yeah, that scene is great.
This movie, look, the virtually all Ernest movies, the plots are just a thin excuse to hang Ernest gags on, and that's not like insulting them. Like, they know exactly what they're doing. They're not trying to hide it. I really liked Ernest disguising himself as a snake wrangler to get into that building.
Yes.
And like, I mean, he's like tanning his skin. He's blacking out a tooth. He's speaking in the Cajun-esque accent. Really looking like the third Briscoe brother. I mean, that's it. Really couldn't get out of my mind.
Is that the other thing? Do the Briscoe brothers owe everything to Snake Wrangler Ernest?
It all comes back to Ernest. Jim Varney created all characters that we know. All modern characters come from Jim Varney. But I like that the cherry on top of this is whenever they actually bring snakes out to him, he's grossed out by him and he doesn't like snakes.
Yep. He's fun. Like, they drive out to the woods and he's like just throwing them back into the wilderness, and he's getting all bit up and everything. It is absolutely wonderful watching him. He plays a lot of different characters in this movie. Gets to stretch around. The governor's student, I forget what that character's name is, the one that busts Santa Claus out of jail, just making him look like a smarmy corporate lawyer type, and then he's got the old woman, which is a character he's done. I think he might do something like that in every single one of these movies.
I think so, but that one's the neck brace, I guess, to hide the Adam's apple,
Yeah.
but he smushes his chin up against it. It's good. And the first shot of him as that woman is like all granny side boob. Like they put so much of that boob into frame. It's a little uncomfortable, but that's good.
One of Ernest's repeated gags is that he doesn't know how to say things. And they make good use of that throughout this movie. Some of my favorite lines are one is it's in that lead up to the you need to trust people, but Ernest is like, you better check it out, pointing to like Santa's sack, and Santa Claus is like, why? And Ernest is like, call it a fifth sense. And I was like, wait, what? That one, what we have here is a failure to accumulate.
Yes.
Accumulate. It's always just makes me laugh because he's just Ernest.
Andrew, do you think it was a intentional joke by the filmmakers for Ernest Cab to be number 69?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, nothing in movies is a mistake. So I guess I gotta agree with you.
It's not.
There's also a shot of him opening the glove box, and there's a bumper sticker on the glove box that says "Keep Christ in Christmas," and I'm like, other than being a Christmas reference in a Christmas movie, that seems so weird to be in this film. Like, are they trying to get that message out within Cab number 69 in an Ernest movie?
I mean, that may have been the joke too. Who knows? But also, just to illustrate how long that bumper sticker and this idea has been around, folks, this movie came out in 1988.
The war on Christmas is ongoing, Andrew. It is
ongoing, and I think we're gonna win soon. I feel like
who is we?
The destruction of Christmas, folks, because that's how I obviously
that's where you are. Okay.
Because if I don't get upset that somebody's not saying Merry Christmas, it means that I'm part of the problem. Because there's definitely not multiple holidays taking place throughout the course of December. But anyway, I missed that bumper sticker though. So the fact that it's a bumper sticker in Cab 69 is just the cherry on top, as it were. The John cherry on top.
I talk about Chuck and Bobby a little bit. They're kind of just keeping an eye on the flying reindeer for most of the movie. That's kind of their plot line. They're at the freight storage place where the cargo is being held, and the reindeer are breaking out, and they're walking on the ceiling because that's what flying reindeer do.
Yep.
I don't know. It's kind of strange. Chuck in particular does this thing where at the end of almost all of his scenes, his eyes will go back and forth, and you get that classic I cartoon noise. I definitely remember trying to do that as a kid after watching this movie. I'm like, is it possible to like move your eye? And I still don't know. Andrew, am I doing it fast enough? Am I doing it fast as him?
Yes.
I can't tell if he does it really fast and they add a sound effect and that makes it feel faster, or if this guy has some kind of hidden talent to make his eyes move fast.
Yes.
Or they speed up the film, maybe. I don't know.
I was going to say, they could have sped up the film. I love when Ernest is singing "Oh Christmas Tree," but the only words he sings are "Oh Christmas Tree."
Does he? I don't even remember the scene. Does he sing like the
It's
whole
at the
melody?
beginning.
But just
the whole like he's like, "Oh Christmas tree, oh Christmas tree, oh Christmas tree, oh Christmas tree." Like,
I didn't even clock that. That's hilarious.
It's right at the beginning when he's driving that first guy to the airport. It reminds me of somebody did an edit of the Human League's "Don't You Want Me," but they made every line you were working as a waitress in a cocktail bar. It's that obscure Human League reference definitely brought me back to Ernest. So
it reminds me of Paul Rudd and "Oh, the weather outside
is weather," which I do all the time.
All the time.
Like, especially
Yep, every
like
year.
up here, especially. Like I'll walk outside and it's snowing. The weather outside is weather. And it's been consistently like highs in the 30s lately. Weather outside is weather.
Some really good gags. I like when Santa's in prison or jail, I guess, and we check back in on him, and he's got all of his cellmates singing a Christmas carol, and he's like the conductor.
Yeah.
And then he halts them and puts his arm through the bars to conduct the last guy to do the solo down the hall, and he finishes the song. And then we
Beautiful.
cut to this shot, like looking down the prison hallway, and then all these hands come through the bars to applaud. Hilarious. There's no reason for them to applaud like outside of the jail cell other than like, to get it in the shot, but it was a really good visual gag. And then Andrew, one of the hardest times I laughed in this movie, the whole family cracked up, and I don't even know if it was an intentional joke. It's when I want to say Ernest is leaving the museum to go, just find out where Santa Claus was, so he's going to track him down at the jail. He gets in his car all hurried, and the shot is from inside the cab, looking over at Ernest, and he's like, "Let's go!" And he slowly, like the car starts going, and he slowly moves off screen, but the audio is him like peeling out, but he's moving like 4 miles an hour, and I can't tell if they just added that to try to make it feel more intense, or if that juxtaposition was an intentional joke. But either way, killed me and the whole family. Very funny.
Yeah, I think I'm erring on the side of that was on purpose. But yes, extremely funny. I like our baggage handlers, Chuck and Bill. Is that their names?
Bobby.
Chuck and Bobby. I like when Ernest shows up to get them, and they've had the whole disagreement over whether the slip said elms or elves, and Bobby has been insistent that it's a V and it's elves, and Chuck has been insistent that it's an M and says elms. So they argue about this back and forth, and then finally Ernest shows up, and they're like, "Are you elms?" And he's like, "No." They're like, "All right, then we need elms." But Ernest does this whole thing where he's like, "It's a long story. Before I tell you, let me ask you something. Do you believe in Santa Claus?" And then Chuck just looks up at the flying reindeer on his ceiling and goes, "Somehow I knew this was going to come up." But
that's pretty good. I guess we got to talk about the finale of this movie, Andrew. Ernest flies the sleigh multiple times around the world. Unlike Superman the movie, it does not go backwards in time. I don't know which science you want to believe. But
he wasn't going fast enough. That's it. Like he just, there's a certain threshold of speed that you have to be going to get that.
He ends up literally in outer space before plummeting back down to Earth. It's clearly where like half the budget goes for these flying effects and flying around the world, but it's like our big action climax. I don't know. I guess you call it an action gag, but it's a good way to cap off the film.
Yeah, so we've got Ernest with the sleigh trying to get it, because basically the whole crux here is that like by 7 p.m. on Christmas, we need to have the new Santa Claus in place. And so there's a whole lot of different pieces that are flying in the way of that, and one of which is getting the reindeer in the sleigh. So the helper elves show up. I love the passport guy that like when Santa Claus comes in with his passport, like he's just like, "Is that your actual name?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, stamps it and sends him on his way. And then like when the helper elves show up, it's the same thing where he looks down and like he sees their passports and he's like, "All right, I guess." Like just stamps it and lets them on their way. But like
pre 9/11 airport security for you, Andrew.
For sure. The ultimate pre 9/11 film, Ernest Saves Christmas. But
there's no international travel in this movie. I really don't know why passports are coming into play.
Because they're coming from the North Pole, which is international.
Santa Claus took a commercial flight from the North Pole, Andrew?
Look, Chris, it's not perfect science. Or maybe that's just their form of ID. I don't know. I'm not Santa Claus yet, apparently, because apparently being a redhead with a beard is all it takes to be Santa Claus. according to Santa Claus is Coming to Town. But anyway, I like, so this is also the culmination of Joe's story, because Joe is basically like said he's not going to do it at this point. Like Santa Claus has made the plea, and Joe has kind of been like, I'm not going to do it, and kind of says, you've not convinced me. He's like, I've not seen anything that tells me that what you're telling me is the truth. Like the bag isn't real. He can't show him the sleigh. He can't actually show him anything. And so Joe is kind of like, I can't just agree to it with nothing. And so on Christmas Eve, he's in contract negotiations to star in this Christmas horror movie. It's lining up sequels because this is what you do on Christmas Eve, apparently. And he's got these consternations, like he's got these issues, he's got these concerns, primarily about the violence and the language. He doesn't want to swear, and he doesn't want it to be so violent. And they're kind of like, why are you signing up to be in a movie called Christmas Sleigh? SLAY. And it's goes back and forth, and then he sees the sleigh outside. He sees Ernest joyriding the Christmas sleigh outside, and he has that moment where he's like, it's him. He's like, it's real. And he says, I think he even says, it's him. And then he stops for a second and he goes, I'm him. And that's the moment where he's like, no, that's it. That's what I need to do. That's where I need to be. And I think the work by Oliver Clark and that reaction is very good. I think it really sells that, like, all right, I've seen it. I'm doing it. There's no question in his mind in that moment that being the new Santa Claus is all he needs to do. And I like that. And then he immediately runs in and he's like, all right, I'm in. Let's do it. And then obviously, so he runs to the Children's Museum where Santa Claus is at with Mary. And that's when all of our characters kind of reconvene, because at this point they've all kind of gone their separate ways. Pamela / Harmony is off at the sack. Ernest is trying to get the reindeer, and Joe is off doing his thing. So we all come back together. She brings the sack. Ernest brings the sleigh and the reindeer, and Joe brings the Yuletide. And it's the culmination of everything. Joe becomes the new Santa Claus, and then lets Ernest drive the sleigh one more time while Harmony gets to be the helper elf. And so our heroes get one more chance to kind of help out with Santa Claus here. And it's wonderful.
And that's Ernest Saves Christmas. He does, in fact, save Christmas. Ernest is exactly how I remember him from my childhood. And I was a little bit... Ernest is obviously tied up in nostalgia for me because I watched it growing up. And I kind of offered it, like, like my daughter. I was like, I'm going to watch this. If you want to watch, no hard feelings if you don't watch with me. But the entire family ended up watching this movie and getting a kick out of it. Like, I was kind of surprised my 13-year-old daughter, like, enjoyed this movie, not having nostalgia for it. But there is, I guess, something timeless about a man acting this way. I don't know about this kind of campy humor in a holiday story, but still works.
Hey, it's the wholesome all-American story of us picking a new Santa Claus.
Andrew, we are just barreling through the month of December. Are you in the holiday spirit at this point? Are you feeling the Christmas cheer? How's it hitting you this year?
I'm feeling it. Maybe not as much as I always have, but it's there. I'm hoping we got the tree up. We got to do a couple more things. We're hopefully going to hit the Chris Kindle Market, which is a big multi-location Christmas market that they have in Chicago. I like it a lot. It's something I always do now to try to go and get myself in the mood. I always buy myself an ornament. That's what I do as I go every year. Buy myself a fancy ornament and do that. So I am I'm feeling it. How about yourself?
Yeah. That sounds good. Yeah, I'm feeling it. I love this time of year. I love Christmas, but normally I'm just behind is my whole thing. Normally by now I've got Christmas records playing. We've got our tree up. We are behind on decorating. We're pretty good on gift buying. We're almost done there. But otherwise, like I'm not looking around my house and seeing Christmas everywhere. But just life's been crazy busy. I got a friend's wedding coming up that I'm in. That's taking some time. So I just juggling a lot of things, but I'm just trying to play catch up a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I love this time of year. I'm sure I'll get there, get the rest of these decorations up, and get to relax a little bit. Drink some hot chocolate. It's been kind of cold here in Houston, which we don't always get in December, but that helps. I not as cold as Chicago. I see you. I
didn't say anything.
But
I didn't say.
I saw it. With
I
your
didn't say
eyes.
anything. I didn't say nothing.
Andrew, let's get to our question of the week here. If you want to leave us a question for a future episode, you can do just that. Just hop into our Discord. There's a link in the show notes. There's a channel in our Discord server called Question of the Week. You can leave us a question just like Mike Lynch did. Here's what he says. Are there entertainment filming practices that you don't consider necessary anymore? Mine is scaring young kids to make marital fights and other situations more authentic. This is mostly a Martin Scorsese gripe, but it's been in other films, like End of Watch, and doesn't add anything to the story for me except empathy for the tiny actor. Andrew, I disagree. I think it's a good thing to scar young children for the sake of my entertainment.
And that's the end of us, folks. We had a good run here on Best of the Rest. I want to thank you all for joining us. I just want to get very clear that I ended the show before Chris got us canceled. I pulled the plug before it happened. This was always going to be the last episode. I knew that from the beginning. Chris may not have. He will sell this differently in all of the tell-all memoirs that are going to be coming at the end of the day. But I made the call, and I did it before we were canceled. Chris, that is terrible. What are you saying?
I'm kidding. I'm obviously joking. Yeah,
yes.
Okay, so just we'll start with this specific example here. So I don't know a lot of these. I know this concept he's talking about, but it sounds like he's referring to some specific stories I'm not familiar with. I like the movie End of Watch. I'm a little upset that maybe there's a behind the scenes story that's going to upset me. But yeah, the idea that you have to scare your child actor in real life to get a reaction of them being scared to insert as a reaction shot into your movie of something that's happening on screen is nonsense. I mean, I will go one step farther and say any director that feels like they need to trick their actors to giving a certain performance or break them down. I mean, like Stanley Kubrick.
Stanley Kubrick is obviously the one that I'm thinking of.
Alfred Hitchcock on Set the Birds and other
Tibby Hedren, yeah.
Yeah, so there's lots of stories, usually male directors with female actors. Horrible stuff. I
almost
think
exclusively, I would say.
That is... Look, that's just... It sounds so obvious. That's not good directing. And I don't just mean like morally or anything, but like, that's not your job as a director. No. Your job as a director is hire the right actor, help them with their motivation, and let them do their work that they're hired to do, not quote unquote trick them or force them into doing that. So yeah, I'm disgusted by all of it. And not to use Mike Lynch's words against him here, but he says don't consider necessary anymore. They were never necessary. And I'm sure you agree. Necessary. I'm sure he agrees with that. But yeah, this stuff is
man, Mike Lynch about to get canceled now too. We're just all getting canceled here. But no, I agree completely. Like I think of obviously Tibby Hedren on The Birds. She's spoken very heavily about what Hitchcock put her through on that. Shelley Duvall on The Shining, another one that comes up a lot as far as someone who got put through the ringer for the sake of a quote unquote performance. And you hear it a lot of different stories of, we're going to genuinely kind of traumatize these people to get a performance out of it. It's like the polar opposite of like method acting. Like method acting is like when an actor willfully chooses to like immerse themselves in a role because they're super pretentious and want to make themselves seem mysterious in the media. Brian Cox's response to method acting is probably still my favorite. Just act. Just read the lines, do it, act. Like, but like it's like the polar opposite of like, well, the actor is not, submerging themselves in the role or submersing themselves in the role. So I'm going to literally put them in a genuine, real life, scary situation in order to get the response that I want. And it's not, first off, it's just nasty. It's just really ugly. It's an ugly way to treat people. It's an ugly way to view other people. As even as a director, just having this strange stance that like I can do whatever I want to my actors, quote unquote, for the sake of a performance. And it's horrifying, frankly. Like I don't have any problem saying that. It is genuinely aberrant behavior where it is completely dehumanizing. It's disrespectful. And like I said, it's almost always stories of we're actually going to scare children or we're actually going to scare women. And it's almost exclusively done by male directors. And you all can read between the lines on that. I don't need to say it out loud, but there's a power dynamic at play there that is certainly not a good look for anyone. And if that's how you think you need to treat your actors, or you think that that's how you just need to treat people, back to just simply like, just don't treat people this way. Like it's that kind of insane thing where it's like, oh, cool, we have to tell film directors not to traumatize their actors for the sake of getting the right performance. Like the fact I have to say that out loud to a grown man, like,
if only Santa Claus had told Stanley Kubrick, trust actors. It pays off more often than you'd think. Normally it's a bit of call to action where like I ask you to give us your answers on this. Do you disagree with us? Do you like traumatizing kids in movies? Do you think that's a worthwhile endeavor? Hop into our Discord. Sound off.
Tell me.
Let us know.
Swear to God.
Tweet at maybe Seth Rogen on Twitter. And
I'm gone. I don't have Twitter anymore.
Good.
I don't have it. I have no X. I have no X anymore. But I can't do it. Anyway, horrible. Folks, I gotta be, and I'm not saying that like, there are actors who like I said, if you want to method act and like, I'm not saying that like you can't method act. I just, most of the time when someone talks about method acting, it's somebody like Jared Leto where I'm just like, oh, so it's a gimmick so that nobody notices the rest of the crap about you. But I just, don't tell me. If you enjoy any of this or you think that there's valid validity to any of it, I need you to not speak it because I will be very upset at you if you tell me this. And I have a particular set of skills. No, but
honestly, it's just a matter of consent because there's certainly stories of grueling shoots where like actors are going through a lot, but like they signed up for that and them and the director are on the same page and are putting that effort in and everybody's on board. But like kids can't consent to that kind of stuff, nor should they have to. And the women we've given our examples certainly did not sign up for what they were put through. So it's just a matter of consent, like so many things in life. And be kind, choose kindness. Don't traumatize your actors out there. So yeah, if you want to sound off on this, do so, at your discretion. Let us know in the Discord, the social media. Next week, very big episode. We are talking Hook. We are joined by a very special guest. Returning friend of the show, Justin Michael is back, as is tradition, his third holiday special in a row. We are so happy to have him back. Can't wait for y'all to hear it. Come back next week. And remember that maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. You can follow him on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy and check out our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That is the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. Or they speed up the film, maybe. I don't know.
I was gonna say they could have sped up the film. Hold on one second, Chris. I have to check in for my flight in 26 seconds. So I'm just
got to get that good seat, Andrew. What do you get? Window or aisle? What do you prefer?
I'm an aisle man because I'm tall, so
legs. I
get to stretch out a little bit.
I also like not depending on anyone else to go to the restroom.
Exactly. Not that I use the restroom on planes very much, but God, I really don't enjoy flying. I have the movie on my TV running while we're recording. Just the part where he's like covering his hands in butter while he's making pancakes. And it's just like giant bowl of butter. Like, bro, what?